In an age when castles pierced the skies and cathedrals reached for heaven, one structure quietly rewrote what humans thought possible. Imagine standing before a river so wide it seemed to swallow the earth. The air smells of damp stone and smoke from distant forges. You hear the rumble of carts, the echo of horses' hooves, the murmur of traders speaking in tongues from every corner of Europe. And then, rising from the mist, you see it. A bridge so impossibly long it seems to defy belief. A bridge that would stand for centuries as a symbol of faith, power, and human endurance. This is the story of the longest bridge built in the medieval world. The astonishing Pont Saint-Biazet, better known as the Bridge of Avignon. But to understand how such a wonder came to exist, we must step back into the 12th century, a time when Europe was still emerging from darkness. Roads were dangerous, rivers were barriers, and most towns were cut off from the rest of the world. To build a bridge was no simple act of convenience. It was a declaration, a promise that civilization was pushing forward. And in the city of Avignon, in southern France, that promise took shape through the vision of a shepherd boy. Legend says his name was Ben-Azet, a humble, young shepherd tending his flock by the Rhône River. One day, as he looked at the fierce current sweeping everything in its path, he claimed to have heard a divine voice. The voice of an angel, commanding him to build a bridge across it. The townspeople laughed. How could a poor boy hope to build a bridge where even the mightiest engineers had failed? But faith, as history often shows, can move more than mountains. It can build them, stone by stone. Ben-Azet took a single stone and laid it where the first pillar of the bridge would stand. It's said that the rock was so heavy that dozens of men struggled to move it. Yet the boy lifted it alone, guided by his unwavering belief. Whether legend or miracle, that act inspired a city. Soon, craftsmen, masons, and laborers from across the region joined his vision. Thus began one of the most ambitious construction projects in medieval Europe, a bridge that would connect not just two riverbanks but two worlds. The Rhône was a monster of a river. Its currents were violent, unpredictable, and often flooded with snowmelt from the Alps. Many had tried to span it before, but none had succeeded for long. Yet in 1177 work began, and against all odds it continued. For 8 long years, through storms, floods, and political turmoil, stone after stone was placed, forming an unbroken path that stretched nearly a kilometer, about 900 meters long, supported by 22 massive arches. In the 12th century, no other bridge on Earth came close to this scale. Picture it, a sweeping ribbon of pale limestone reaching across roaring water, its arches casting perfect crescents of shadow below. Each pillar was anchored deep into the riverbed, a feat that defied the engineering knowledge of its time. There were no cranes, no modern cement, no steel reinforcements. Only human will, primitive pulleys, and an endless rhythm of hammers on stone. To cross the Pont Saint-Biazet was to walk across a miracle built by mortal hands. But the bridge was more than a marvel of engineering. It was a symbol of faith and unity. Along its span stood chapels and shrines where travelers would stop to pray before continuing their journeys. Pilgrims walked across it on their way to holy sites. Merchants carried spices, fabrics, and ideas across its arches. Kings and knights crossed it during crusades, and with each step, the bridge became a thread in the fabric of medieval Europe. Avignon thrived, transforming from a small trading town into one of the most important crossroads of the continent. And yet, the Rhône would not be conquered so easily. Nature, as always, reminded humanity of its place. Floods struck again and again, tearing at the foundations, swallowing arches, and testing the resilience of the builders. Each time, the people rebuilt, repairing what they could, reinforcing what they must. But by the 17th century, after centuries of punishment, the bridge began to lose the battle. The waters claimed most of its structure, leaving behind only a few surviving arches. 4 of the original 20, 2 still stand today, quiet and weathered, jutting into the river like the bones of a sleeping giant. Standing before those remnants today, it's hard not to feel the weight of history pressing through the silence. The stone is rough beneath your hand, worn smooth by countless feet long gone. You can almost hear the echoes, merchants calling out prices, monks whispering prayers, soldiers marching toward uncertain wars. The bridge is gone, but its soul remains, a testament to the audacity of medieval minds who dared to believe they could tame nature itself. But what truly makes the Pont Saint-Bernaz extraordinary is not only its length. Though in its prime, it stretched farther than any other medieval bridge, but what it represented. In an era when much of Europe was fractured by war, religion, and feudal divisions, this bridge connected people. It made trade possible, communication faster, and cultures closer. It was not just a structure of stone. It was a bridge of dreams, faith, and progress. And yet, the Pont Saint-Bernaz wasn't alone in its grandeur. Across medieval Europe, other bridges rose, each with its own story and mystery. The Charles Bridge in Prague, built in the 14th century, stands as a Gothic masterpiece lined with saints and legends. The Old London Bridge, finished in 1209, once carried entire houses and shops on its back. So massive it was called a city unto itself. But even those could not match the scale and daring of the Avignon Bridge during its time. For over 400 years, it was the longest bridge in the known world, a feat that baffled even Renaissance engineers who came centuries later to study its ruins. Some historians argue that its length, around 900 meters, made it the most ambitious bridge built in Europe before the modern age. To put that in perspective, it was longer than many Roman aqueducts, longer than most castle walls, and built with technology far more primitive. It wasn't backed by an empire. It was built by a community, driven by faith and guided by a boy's vision. But as with all great monuments, time turned it into legend. By the 15th century, the bridge was already a mythic symbol in songs and poems. The famous French children's tune, Sur le pont d'Avignon, on the Bridge of Avignon, carries its name to this day, echoing across generations, long after the bridge itself faded from use. What began as a divine command to a shepherd became a story told by millions, reminding us that even the grandest human achievements begin with a single impossible idea. And yet, there's something haunting about its ruins. As if the stones themselves remember the struggle. You can almost sense the centuries of floods, wars, and rebirth pressing against their silent endurance. You realize that medieval builders didn't have the luxury of perfection. Their work was messy, uncertain, and often doomed. But that's what makes it human. They built not for glory, but because they believed their hands could leave something eternal behind. When you look at the remnants of the Pont Saint-Bernaz today, with the Rahardsnee flowing endlessly beneath it, you're not just seeing an old bridge. You're seeing the heartbeat of a civilization that refused to surrender to its limits. You're seeing the birth of engineering courage. The medieval world wasn't just about swords and castles. It was about dreamers who imagined roads that connected kingdoms and bridges that defied rivers. Perhaps that's the true legacy of Avignon's bridge, not its stones, not its arches, but the invisible line it drew between faith and reason, between myth and reality. It reminds us that human progress has always depended on those willing to believe in what others call impossible. So the next time you hear the gentle tune of Sur le pont d'Avignon,